Hello everyone and welcome back to my Warhammer 40k guides. I am Brady and today I will be discussing Perfect Imbalance and applying it to competitive Warhammer 40k. For those of you that don't know what Perfect Imbalance is, it's when a game isn't perfectly balanced for the sake of fun and an always evolving meta. But because of this, it makes the game balanced. Now that sounds contradictory, but trust me, it's not. I got the idea to make this video after watching Extra Credits video on Perfect Imbalance for video games. So now, let me explain why I think Perfect Imbalance is good and healthy while applying it to competitive Warhammer 40k. So first off, let's talk about Perfect Balance and how Warhammer 40k would be with Perfect Balance. Perfect Balance is when every unit or character in the game has an equal counterpart in every other army. For gamers who have been nerds like me for a very long time, you might remember a real-time strategy game for PC called Warcraft. Not World of Warcraft, but the original Warcraft that was released in 1994. This game had perfect balance in the regard that every unit from each army had an equal in the other army. You had Orc Grunts, and their equal was Human Footmans, and then you would have Orc Spearmans, and their equivalent would be Human Archers. Everything from both armies had basically the same stats, give or take a couple of extremely minor differences, but they looked different to keep things interesting. Kind of like in chess terms, if you have a rook, they have a rook. You have some pawns, they have some pawns. It's the same idea. Everything is balanced, and it all does the same stuff. It's just different colors for each side, so you know who belongs to which army. This created, in my opinion, very stale gameplay that didn't really see many changes once the most optimized way to play was discovered. At that point, it just came down to who can run through the motions better and who played faster. Strategy and anything unique was pretty much gone at that point. It also, once you realized how everything worked and how your army always had an equivalent in another army, it got to be very boring for me. Because there really was no uniqueness to any army other than how it looked. And to me, that just wasn't very fun. I like stuff when everything's very different and everybody does something different. Now let's talk about Perfect Imbalance. Units in Warhammer 40k usually don't have an equal in every other army, but sure, some do. For example, all of the Astartes and Heretic Astartes share a lot of the same units, like Tactical Marines, with minor tweaks like Chapter Tactics and Legion traits. But overall, Orcs don't have an equivalent to a Tactical Marine, and they don't have an equivalent to a Razorback. They have things that are somewhat like those things, but the stat lines are all completely different. And they also include different weapons that have different stat lines from the Space Marine stuff as well. Because of this, armies always look much different from each other and have very many different play styles, which keeps the game very unique, but this sometimes does cause imbalances. This is where the points cost system comes into play. Each unit equals a certain amount of points, kind of like in Warcraft. But in Warcraft, the units would cost time and gold, while in Warhammer, they just cost points towards your army. So because of this balancing system, this means a Space Marine will always be worth more than one Orc boy. So because of this, you can bring a lot more boys to make up for this, which in turn balances out the game. Now because of this, sometimes things aren't perfectly balanced because balancing isn't necessarily an easy process, especially for a game like Warhammer 40k that has hundreds of different units. It takes a lot of manpower and playtesting to really discover what each unit should be costed in order to be balanced compared to everything else in the game. But sometimes things do get overlooked. An example of this in our current game would be Dark Reapers from Craftworld armies. For the amount of points they cost, they put out a tremendous amount of damage, and in my opinion, they need to be adjusted just a little bit. Not any rules changes, just an increase in points. But for the time being, if we want to compete in tournaments, we have to play with the current rule set, meaning people will be spamming Dark Reapers because they are extremely efficient for their points cost right now. So because of this, the metagame evolves around you seeing armies that are bringing stuff that wouldn't normally see the light of day in competitive tournaments just because they counter Dark Reaper spam so extremely well. This is a perfect example of Perfect Imbalance at work. The idea is that for the times where the game is slightly imbalanced, the metagame will evolve to a state to counter whatever the imbalanced thing is at the time, therefore creating balance. Then, inevitably, when Games Workshop decides to patch the game with an errata or an FAQ, which they seem to do quite often when there is a problem, the cycle will continue, creating more perfect imbalance and an always evolving meta, which will keep the game consistently fresh and unique so we won't be stuck facing the same armies on the top tables for long periods of time. This is why I think Perfect Imbalance is great for Warhammer 40k. since I would get bored if everything had the same stat lines but just looked different. A good example of this for other nerds like myself that currently play video games would be League of Legends. Like in the video stated by extra credits that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, League of Legends is a perfect example for perfect imbalance. Because the game is not balanced. Every champion in League of Legends does not do the same amount of damage or have the same abilities as other champions in League of Legends. And if you don't know what I mean when I say champions because you don't play League of Legends, champions are the characters that you play in the game. So with League of Legends, Riot creates a new champ. That new champ usually is slightly overtuned and extremely strong, like the new champion Zoe that came out not too long ago. So because of this, the meta has to change. The top picks change to different champions that normally weren't seen before because they happen to be good against Zoe. Then eventually, like in a patch that's coming up pretty soon, or might have just passed, I don't know, I haven't been keeping up to date with League of Legends, Zoe is supposed to be getting nerfed really hard. This will change the meta up again, and it will bring back champs that were pushed out of the meta because of Zoe, and so on and so forth, and it creates, like we've called it, a perfect imbalance. The game will never be perfectly balanced, but because of the way the system is, and how you have so many options, and how you can bring stuff that counters other stuff, or in whatnot, you can basically make the game balanced by bringing what's good. Another perfect example of this would be StarCraft, the original StarCraft. StarCraft Brood War is regarded as one of the most balanced games of all time. And it's not because the game's actually balanced. It's actually far from it, in my opinion. But it's because everybody has found, in the pro scene at least, everyone has found strategies on how to counter the stuff that was broken at one point in time. Originally in StarCraft, people thought Zealots were OP because they could just run into a Marine's base and just murder everything. Then the Marines realized, wait, we can build our buildings in a wall, so now stuff can't run at us, and we can just shoot at them over the wall. Holy crap, Zealots aren't OP, we just needed to discover a strategy that actually countered them. That's what Perfect Imbalance is. It keeps the game interesting because everything is very different, but everything has a counter to something else. So as long as you have the game knowledge, you're technically not going to find anything imbalanced because you know how to counter everything. So going back to Warhammer 40k, all of this does apply, because whenever you find something that you think might be OP or overpowered, like for example, a lot of people thought Magnus was overpowered in the beginning of 8th edition, I proved to you and showed you in one of my battle reports that even with his 3-up invulnerable rerolling 1s, you can still kill Magnus. Magnus doesn't have that ability anymore, but I still did show that he wasn't necessarily OP. Sure, it was really strong, but it wasn't OP. It could be dealt with if you knew how to deal with it, and for Magnus, it was volume of fire. It didn't matter the strength of the shots or anything, just shoot a million shots at him and you'll make him roll some 2s. So that's how it goes for the rest of Warhammer 40k. The game's not perfectly balanced, but to be honest, if it was, and let's say Orcs had the same stats as Space Marines, who also had the same stats as Fire Warriors, who also had the same stats as Necron Warriors, it wouldn't be interesting. Necrons wouldn't be coming back from the dead, Space Marines wouldn't be getting their chapter tactics, Orcs wouldn't be able to run hordes because they're the same price as Space Marines. The game would get so stale so quick, at least to me. Perfect Imbalance makes the closest to a balanced game you could possibly have while still allowing room for unique things and fun, essentially. That's what Perfect Imbalance is, and that's why I think it works for Warhammer 40k. Well anyways, that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more Warhammer 40 content. If you are already subscribed and want to help support the channel even further, you can do so on Patreon. All money gained through Patreon always goes back into the channel in one way, shape, or form. Well anyways, thanks for watching the video. I hope the video taught you something that you didn't already know, and thanks to Extra Credits for giving me the inspiration for this video. Well anyways, thanks again for watching, and happy wargaming.